welcome to Hawkie Talkie 2018 NHL Trade Deadline Day Recap Edition. A lot of trades happened today, but we're going to start off with the most important ones. Those are the ones involving the Blackhawks, so let's get right to it. By far the biggest news that came out today was this. Yep, that's right. Stan Bowman had me on the phone. He said, "Hey Clay, look, I've got some contending teams looking to add your services for this playoff push, the Stanley Cup run. They want you on their team. Would you be willing to move your no move clause to make this happen?" I said, "Nah, man, I can't do it, Stan. I just can't. I'm going to stick with the Blackhawks through thick and thin. I'm right where I want to be." All joking aside, the Blackhawks did make two trades today, and we're going to start off with the biggest one, the one that actually happened first, and that is the one involving Ryan Hartman. Even though we had heard rumblings of teams having interest in Hartman leading up to this day, I don't think a lot of people actually thought Hartman would actually get traded today. I think it was one of those situations where we didn't come into the trade deadline looking to get rid of him. He's been always thought of as a core piece of our younger group of players, but it just so happened that an offer got put on the table that was just too good for us to refuse. And the type of offer that would be too good to refuse had to have been a first rounder at least, and then some. And that's exactly what we got here. That trade would send Ryan Hartman and this year's 5th round draft pick to the Nashville Predators, another surprise part of this trade, in return for a 1st round pick this year, a 4th round pick this year, and Victor Ejdsell. I think that's how you pronounce it. I have no idea though. If you haven't heard about Victor before, that's alright. Not a lot of people have. He's a big-bodied centerman, 6'5", hard to knock off the puck, kind of similar to Hossa in that regard. But he's playing over in Sweden's top league right now. He's 22 years old. He was the MVP of the 2nd-tier league over there last season before signing as an undrafted free agent with the Predators. Obviously, he is now with the Blackhawks due to this trade, but it'll be interesting to see if he's able to make the team next year or the year after that. We don't really know exactly when he'll get to this team, but it seems like the Blackhawks are really high on him. And then obviously there's the picks. The 1st rounder is absolutely huge. That means we have 2 1st round picks in this upcoming draft, a draft that's supposed to be pretty deep with talent, and considering we don't have a 2nd round pick, having 2 firsts is pretty nice. It's obvious with this trade being pretty much the same return as the Sharks gave Buffalo for Evander Kane today, that the Predators are all in. They gotta win the Cup within this year or the next 2 years probably, because once that Seattle expansion draft hits, the Preds are gonna get screwed over quite a lot, especially if the same rules apply that did this past offseason with Vegas. And if you're a team that's going all in for a Stanley Cup, you tend to overpay at the deadline. That's just kind of the reality of the situation. It's a seller's market at the deadline. It always is. We know this quite well as Hawks fans since we've had multiple Stanley Cup runs over recent history. Just going back to 2015 when we gave Arizona a 1st round draft pick and Klaus Dalbec for Antoine Vermette. We also gave Philadelphia a 2nd rounder and a conditional 4th for Kimmo Timonen, a guy who hadn't played all year. Obviously 2015 ended up working out for us, but we've also had years where we've overpaid for guys like Dale Weiss and Thomas Fleischmann and had that season just flame out. There are no guarantees, but it's obvious that the Preds are trying to do their best to give themselves the best shot at a cup they can this year. It sucks to lose Hartman, it really does, but we got a great return for him. The only other trade today involving the Blackhawks was one we expected and one that came right at the deadline. Tommy Wingels gets sent to Boston in exchange for a conditional 5th round pick in this upcoming draft. Basically what that means is that it's a 5th round pick unless Boston gets past the 1st round in the playoffs this year, then that 5th round pick turns into a 4th round pick. This trade wasn't as unexpected as the Hartman trade. Basically, we figured Tommy Wingels would be the one sent out on loan to another team for a cup run. He's an unrestricted free agent after this season. He was an unrestricted free agent this past offseason and decided to sign with Chicago because he's from the area. And that very well could be the same thing that happens next offseason. If he doesn't re-sign with Boston, he could come right back to Chicago. And in that case, getting a draft pick for him now and then possibly retaining him in the offseason, not that bad of an idea. I like this trade, and it was something that we kind of all expected to happen anyway. Speaking of Boston, they acquired Rick Nash from New York over the weekend. They're ahead of schedule with their rebuild this year, and they're deciding, hey, let's go for it while we're here. Another team that's kind of ahead of schedule with their rebuild is Vegas Golden Knights, just blowing out everyone's expectations. They just got Tatar from the Red Wings in exchange for a first, second, and third round pick. It's an overpayment, but they have a lot of draft picks to burn anyhow, so I guess it makes sense. Now, they were really going hard after Erik Karlsson. Ottawa decided not to trade Karlsson, which, smart move, Ottawa. There are some players you just don't trade. Erik Karlsson is one of them. Patrick Kane is one of them. Sidney Crosby is one of them. Connor McDavid is probably one of them. Austin Matthews, you probably could argue, is one of them as well. There is obviously a price for every player, but there are some players you just don't trade. They're franchise players. Now, a lot of people are going to say, what about Gretzky? He got traded, and he's the great one. Gretzky would not be traded in this era of the NHL. That was a completely different era. That was a completely different situation. He would not be traded today. You know, with everything that happened today, I'm actually kind of glad that the Hawks aren't in the playoffs this year because there are so many teams that are just going all in. You have the Predators going all in. Vegas is going all in. Boston's going all in. Tampa Bay is going all in. They just got McDonough and TJ Miller from the Rangers. Pittsburgh's pretty much all in for a three-peat. There are a lot of tough teams in the NHL going into the playoffs. This is going to be a brutal playoffs. So having the Hawks sit this one out, not really that bad of an idea. But I've talked enough. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all the happenings that went on today. How do you think the Blackhawks did? Are you sad to see Hartman go? What teams do you think won or lost today? Let me know down in the comments section below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Hawkie Talkie. Like, share, and subscribe if you can. I appreciate it so much if you do. But most importantly, the only things I really ask from you is for you to stay safe and make good decisions. And I'll see you next time.